Hey, today I'm talking to Tivania Moodley, and how she crossed my path is actually an interesting anecdote, because while I was writing and researching on my last post about vulnerability and asking for help, I opened LinkedIn to check on something that Andy Lopata, who I interviewed for the topic, had said and shared. And there, actually at the center of my timeline, was a photo of Tivania, and capturing right up above it. And it was about change and being and showing yourself, no matter what people say about you. And I got curious, and Tivania, I checked out your page or your profile, your LinkedIn profile. And there I actually found more what triggered me, especially your mentioning of the story that once shaped you and the creation of a new story. And actually, I'm very interested in this. We all have these stories that we share about ourselves, and also that we share with ourselves. And oftentimes, I think they're based on past events, they're based on truth, which in many cases are no longer valid. But just by repetition, in a way, we keep carrying this story forward, and it's not serving us. And actually, the author David Grossman, he reversed this as the primal story. You know, it's the story that we tell about ourselves, and actually that determines our life to a big part if we're not careful. So I'd love to talk to you about this story, because I think your story and also the shift and how this happened for you has we just talked about it previously shortly, has had a big impact on your life, and also in terms of inspiring other people. So could you please share more about your old story, so to speak, and where and how things shifted into a new story, and how that happened for you?
So 7 years ago, I had a failed suicide attempt. And what led to that event was a culmination and succession of really traumatic life experiences. I had the experience of rape, I had the experience of intimate partner violence, 3 miscarriages, 2 divorces, failure in the sense of losing everything financially. So there was a whole succession of things that have happened. But the story about the narrative in which we view ourselves is a concept that I learned a few years ago by one of the life coaches that I used to see. And he explained to me that from the age of 7, we have what is called a fundamental life operating principle, or flop. A flop is basically a story that we perceive about ourselves and becomes the narrative in which we live our lives.
Yeah.
My story, because of my life experiences, was I am not good enough.
Yeah.
That was the narrative. My narrative was I am not good enough. And every single decision that I made going forward emanated from that I am not good enough. It was only in the last 7 years since having my failed suicide attempt did I realize that as much as we are all storytellers and we all have a story, a lot of that story is not our own. A lot of perception of ourselves emanate from our life experiences or systems that we are indoctrinated with. And I had to go through a process of unbecoming and find my voice and listening to my truth, and from there establishing a new story. And that story was an empowering story of I am love, and I am peace, and I am a survivor, and all of these derivatives that speak about the tenacity of the human spirit. So I think, in essence, to answer you, we each have a story, but whether that story is our own is something that we need to understand.
Yeah, that's actually a very, very good point. And I've observed this too, both with myself, but also with other people, how we internalize kind of external events and opinions, and we kind of make them our own because everyone is doing it or everyone is saying it. And it takes a lot of presence and being kind of awake, I could say, to distinguish between the two, you know? Yeah.
Absolutely that. I think that we go through many years of our lives in a state of unconsciousness.
Yes.
So that it's like being, a robot, and we have this prescribed way that we have to be. I know growing up in the Indian community, there is a cultural indoctrination of how women are supposed to be, which is silent and smiling. And that becomes my narrative. And for me to establish what is the truth, it took, as I said, that unbecoming and sort of an awakening to who I truly am, apart from what the world told me I had to be.
Mm-hmm. Something that triggers me there, you say who I truly am. I also think there's an element of becoming, you know, and who you are becoming and what wants to kind of show itself or what wants to emerge within you, but also what pulls you perhaps from the future or what. So how do you, what is your view on this? It's not a static thing, I imagine, right?
Yeah, but it's actually not a becoming, because when we come onto this earth, so if you think about babies, babies know differently who they are, right? They are fearless. They know no distinction about, you know, good and bad. There's no divisiveness. There's no racism or hatred. Those are the things that get indoctrinated into them and what they learn, right? For us, we know we come onto this earth as babies, knowing exactly who we are. We come in the purest form. So if you think about babies and the essence of babies, energy is a purest form. So with animals have the purest energy ever. They're not tainted by all of the shit that we're tainted with. Within the period of the first 7 years of your life, you are then, you know, put through the paces of learning whatever you have, you know, to model against, right? So that's family, that's your traditions, all of the things that you get taught. And then you sort of unbecome, and you have to, you know, forge this image of what you told you have to be. And you get to that point where you learn, okay, this doesn't feel right. And then you go back to who you truly are. So to answer you, I feel like we know exactly who we are in our purest form when we are born, and then we go through the process of all of the stuff that, you know, we learn through seeing what other people are doing.
Socialization,
yeah, exactly that, socialization, and then after that, it's coming back to who you truly are.
Yeah, so it's basically you say it's coming back to our purest,
your essence,
purest,
I call it the essence. The essence is the purity of who you are. The spirit of who you are.
Yeah, but you don't think that this, you think this essence is already there as a child, or sorry, as a baby, and there's no development, or there's no growth in this process? Because I'm sure there is, right?
So I think the growth comes in a academic way. So the and heart, there's some disparity there. So for me, my basis of everything that I do and my learning has been deeply spiritual. So for me, your essence is still that purity, but we become detached from it, and everything becomes cognitive, which is an ego thing, right? So we learn, and we are programmed. It's a programming, so to speak. Whereas that essence, the spirit, is still exactly the same, but we forget about it. It gets under all of these different layers and layers and layers, and then you have a huge life event, and suddenly there's an awakening. Or something dramatic happens, something catastrophic happens, something, it's usually trauma that triggers that response to say, okay, there's a disconnect now. How do I get back?
It's funny because actually I have a question about this later on. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. As I could take from your LinkedIn profile, and also you speak about this in different sources, you mentioned living and speaking your truth has been a big part of your personal change, and also the change that you want to instill with others.
Yeah.
So how does this relate to the story we create and share about ourselves on the one side, and I guess continuing on our conversation just now with this truth that we have as a baby in our essence, I guess perhaps this speaking and living our truth is bringing it back to that essence. Is that?
Absolutely that, 100% that. But what tends to happen is, as you said, it's the socialization, it's the religious and cultural indoctrination, it is what society deems is right behavior. So we tend to suppress who we truly are, and this quest to conform, right? And then there's a desperation as humans to want to fit in. And I know that was my thing. That I was very different from everyone else, but I tried to conform so that I could fit in and I could be liked. But I actually went against the grain of who I truly am. And if I have to talk about my personal story, as an example, the rape, we come from a society where women don't speak about those things. There's a lot of shame and judgment that is carried there. So, to avoid that shame, we just keep silent. But I know I certainly became as sick as my secrets. And it was only when I started living my truth and saying, I'm actually this person, this is exactly what's happened to me, was I able to liberate and heal myself. It emanated from me speaking and living my truth. Another example is we have this social construct that we have to be a doctor, a lawyer, something academic in order to have some measurement of success in this world. For me, growing up, I was interested in creativity, in poetry, in writing, in music, and those were not deemed to be acceptable career paths. So I had to conform and get into the corporate environment that made me absolutely miserable. And then I had my failed suicide attempt. I realized I'm not going to waste one single moment living someone else's idea of my life. And I'm going to go out there and put myself out there. And, I've been writing for the last 7 years exclusively, editing. I'm a published author now. It's the stuff that I've been wanting to do, but I couldn't do. So from that owning of my truth and who I truly am, was I able to actually live my dream.
Yeah. Actually, carrying on that, I think, like you said, you mentioned this suicide attempt. It's often, it takes a real deep point of despair and catastrophe for us to change, for us to trigger the change.
Yeah.
And to wake up to the detrimental effects of the story that we've been keeping alive. And kind of what you shared is that you weren't able to you became as sick as your secrets, as you said.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so how was that for you? What was the point where you where you even thought of like, hey, I don't want to live anymore, and you were even considering that drastic measure, and then it failed, and from there you changed? Can you share more about that transition point?
So I was actually I was depressed for over 20 years, as I explained, because of the succession of life experiences that I had. I was just suppressing. So it was all of these things. And what happened in 2014, I was in a relationship with someone, and it turned out that he was cheating with my best friend of 13 years. And decided to break the news to me about their affair on my birthday in 2014. So that for me was like the very last straw, because I had already been dealing with all of the stuff. I had been, the last thing was getting out of a second marriage with that kind of shame and judgment on me, and the fear of what life's going to be like as a single mom of 2 kids at that stage. And so that relationship was the trigger or the catalyst that began my suicide ideation. And so from my birthday in April of 2014, right up until June, every single day I had spent meticulously planning that suicide, because I felt life was done with me and I was done with life. I actually was in such a state of despair that I felt I could be of no use to my children, that I had no value in this world. And so it was a really dark place. And for me, there was no way out. The hope and faith just did not, it was non-existent for me. And so when I had planned that event for the 3rd of June, 2014, I had miraculously survived. And to this day, I don't know how. My intention was to go out into a busy street in Johannesburg and drive off a bridge that is notorious for accidents where people die. It was just a testament to how enormous the pain was, that because when I think about it now, I can cringe with the thought of just wanting to drive my car off a bridge. But at that stage, I didn't, I was just living a little, breathing a little and calling it to life, basically. And then what I can only, ascertain as divine providence, my car was literally lifted, that's how it felt, and placed in front of my driveway. And I had absolutely no recollection of how that happened. I had completely blanked out. It literally felt as if my car was carried. The next day, I was working for a law firm as a client services manager, and my manager at the time, a woman that I actually didn't like, gave me the greatest gift ever. She cornered me and she said to me, I know that something's not okay with you. I know that you're in pain. I don't know what it is, but you're not okay. Mm-hmm. But I want you to seek help. And if you don't, you're fired. So I'm very resistant to that because I didn't like her. Firstly, we never had a relationship and I didn't want the help. I wanted to die. Yeah. She put me in touch with an organization on that day, literally on that Thursday, that said to me, the facilitator of that organization or the owner called me and said to me, please, can you give me 3 days of your life, attend a personal development workshop. And if you still want to do what you feel you must do, by all means do it, just give me 3 days. Again, serendipitously, I was given place to be on that workshop the very next day, which is the Friday. And within 3 days, my life changed forever. And that's not even an exaggeration. It was like the transformation happened at a visceral level because I had been for therapy throughout the years. I had been on medication throughout the years, and I'm not just conventional medication. It just never worked for me. The transformation that happened in those 3 days literally brought out all of the stuff that I was hiding for 25 years. And it gave me the freedom. It held space for me, that environment for me to actually say, okay, this is who I truly am. And I was able to get back into the world and realize, okay, I actually now have a purpose that is bigger than me. And that has been my miracle story. And in the last 7 years since doing that workshop, I have not had one bout of depression since then.
So what happened during these 3 days?
So I don't want to give out too much of the workshop because it is a life-changing transformation workshop. What happens is that they do a form of personal development called ontology, which is the practice of the way of being. So it's got its foundation stemmed in spirituality, but it's not, it's non-denominational. What happens is that in these 3 days, they take you through various processes. And again, it's not cognitive. You're not sitting there and making notes. It is processes that you have to physically do, moving your body, talking about it, that releases that energy that's stuck in your body.
Yes, yes.
I've been a part of this organization for the last 7 years, and the work that they do is unbelievable. I have seen the most miraculous transformations before my eyes. I'm a living testament to the power of that kind of therapy, and it worked for me 100%.
But then why not share a little bit more? Because perhaps someone would be watching this and they would be in need of exactly that. And perhaps you could...
It's difficult to explain without giving the details away. And if I have to do that, then it takes away from the actual experience. But basically you go into a safe environment. So it's a designated area that you have to stay in the hotel for 3 days and go through different processes every single day. So it's almost like a roller coaster ride of different kinds of methodologies that are taken from different teachers, and immersing yourself. It's work that you immerse yourself in. And it's an environment where everybody gets to share their stories and everybody has to participate in the events. It's a series of games. It's a series of talks. It's a series of dancing and crying sessions. So it's like an all body experience and everything, the learning can't be undone. So that's the way that it's structured.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I know from experience that we carry a lot of things within our physical body, and we need a physical activation or process or to get rid of it or to release the tension in some cases, or to
because
get past it. And I think also what we talked about before is this honesty and actually showing and being your true self, whatever is there, and allowing it to be there without judgment, etc. Has a tremendous effect on making that happen.
Absolutely. For me, it's just It was just given the space where I was given permission. And I think I had waited 34 years at that stage for someone to say, I give you permission to be exactly who you are.
Yeah.
Just that, but embracing who you are. So saying I am a certain way, or I want to be a certain way, or I love a certain way. It's not just accepting it, but it's embracing it, which is also very different.
Mm-hmm.
It's someone who says, we applaud you, for the fact that you're different. You must embrace your individuality, because each of us are here for a purpose, and you have a very specific way to bring that purpose into the world.
Yeah.
And for me was the biggest gift anyone could ever give me.
Yeah. What's the name of this organization, if somebody wants to look it up?
It's called the SOAR Institute, SOAR.
SOAR Institute.
Institute, yeah.
Okay, there must be a website. I'll be able to find it. I'll put a link in the notes. Yeah, great. Thanks a lot for sharing that experience, or at least some of it. I understand that you also don't want to take away the magic of actually going through and immersing, something like that.
And I'll tell you why, is because our brain is programmed to shut ourselves off from participating fully, because you're not telling yourself stories about what's going to happen, and then your flop kicks in, and then the fear kicks in, and then you don't give yourself fully to that experience. Whereas when you're there and you see everyone else doing it, then you can benefit fully from it. If I hadn't, I probably would have been dead today, for sure. Not probably, I for sure would have been dead. Yeah, then uninhibitedly you can take part and immerse in the process. Yeah, absolutely that.
Yeah. Typically, when we're not present, when we're not awake, as we talked about previously, these stories we create about ourselves and we keep alive, which are for a large part determined by these past events, the opinions and views of other people around us. What about, how can we free ourselves from this and shift our focus to the future and what could be and what is possible, and towards what we want to create, and inwards, and this we've talked about also already, to bring it back to maybe this essence of ourselves? What do we need? We talked about honesty and showing up. What else can we do to form a catalyst for this process?
So I think it involves, the honesty is really multifaceted, because there's a lot of fear attached to owning our truth. You must remember that a lot of people don't have the freedom of that kind of expression, and that's what keeps them captive. For example, if you look at some women, in a cultural space, they don't have a voice. So sometimes expressing and living and owning your truth is something that could get them killed. So it's also being very mindful of that. But for me, the most important thing is that you can't change what you don't see in front of you. Yes. So someone needs to have a willingness to dig up all of the stuff that we suppress and bring that into the fore. So bring all of the darkness into the light and being able to see it properly. Yeah. That's the only way that you can heal. Because again, we live in a society that gives us an easy button in the form of an anesthetic, and that can be drugs, alcohol, sex, food, and now scrolling incessantly on social media. Yeah. There's easy buttons that we can immerse ourselves in to suppress our pain. Yeah. And express our truth, but ultimately it comes out sideways as ill health, as your life falling apart, as you're married. But it comes out and manifests that way. So you can't hide from your truth forever. It will come out in a different way.
I very much recognize what you're saying. Also, when you bring it into light, thereby you allow it to be experienced. You have to move through it. It's the same with those physical exercises or physical processes that happened in those 3 days for you, I imagine. They help you get through it. And it's the same actually with speaking your truth. It's critically important to speak your truth, because it's not always the truth to convey a meaning to someone else or to get your point of view in. Actually, I think the biggest part of speaking your truth is for you to get over whatever it is you're experiencing.
It's for yourself. Absolutely that. So when I started off on this journey of transformation for me and my own personal journey of self-love, everything that I used to write about was the way that I had just honed in on my craft. Writing was just my craft. For me, it was cathartic. It was a form of healing for me.
Yeah.
And it actually resonated with everyone else. So when I wrote my book was never written with the intention of this is going to sell copies and it's going to, I'm going to make money off of it. It was always about honoring my journey.
Yes.
Always about me. And then when that intention happened, as I said to you, it took a life of its own because people are so desperate for substantive truth. People are desperate for truth. And then when they see one person doing it and unashamedly doing it,
Yes.
It's a ripple effect on everybody.
Yeah.
So for you start off with this intention of I'm going to heal myself, but it actually spills over to the people around you, and it has an effect on collective humanity.
Yes.
Look at, I'm in South Africa, you're in Netherlands, and we connected my authentic story. So that in itself is miraculous, right?
Yeah, it's true. I could resonate with it. Or it resonated with me, and I felt like I want to know who this person is. And instantly I asked you without actually, I hadn't even researched any further. I just thought, okay, I want to talk to you. I want to do this interview. And yeah.
I thought you were a catfish until
catfish. No.
Until I saw your link. Yeah, it was lovely. And for me, it's just how you become co-creators with other people to co-create magic. I mean, you're on your own separate journey, I'm on my own separate journey, and then we merge to create more consciousness around these hard conversations. And that for me is just a beautiful thing. Yeah,
Well put. Our self-image and confidence levels have a great influence on how we see ourselves. And this is, obviously, it shapes the stories that we tell and share about ourselves. What are your views on this?
I think this has been the hardest thing ever for me. And it's actually that post that got your attention, because
Yes.
I was talking about being shamed for my body by someone, and how 7 years ago I would have owned that shame. And I did at that stage for a brief moment.
Mm-hmm.
I had no confidence in my physicality and no confidence in, this superficial thing about what we look like.
Yeah.
And then when I started my own self-love journey, I realized that, our confidence should never, ever be attached to the external stuff.
Correct.
The internal. And it sounds so cliched, and I used to think it was such bullshit until I started, this process on my own. And I realized that even, it's so dangerous what we see on social media. It's so dangerous, this beauty ideal that society portrays. It's so dangerous, the lives that or the measurement of success. And we have got to establish those parameters for ourselves. We are the ones that get to define what our worth is. And it's never something that's attached to a material thing or what our bodies look like. And I had to make that distinction, and it is still extremely difficult for me. It is an everyday effort. So my confidence comes from knowing that I'm good enough as I am, and that I'm leading a very purposeful life that impacts people. And for me, that far outweighs anything I could look like, anything that the scale reveals to me about my weight, whatever acquisitions or assets I acquire materially, those things are influential to me.
Yeah. Another personal question, if I may. You mentioned purposeful life. And I don't want to sound inconsiderate or harsh, so I want to be careful with this question, but something that came up for me is when you shared about your suicide. Obviously, you had your 2 kids then, right? Mm-hmm. And you were so down and so, I guess, maybe beat down by your experiences in a way that even this purpose of raising these 2 kids and being a mother to them and giving them life wasn't big enough, and there was still this wish of you to not be there. Yeah, can you share more about how that, because it's difficult to understand. At the same time, I know that if you're in a really dark hole, everything can lose its value. I understand that too.
Yeah. So for me, my purpose was something that I only figured out after the suicide attempt.
Yeah.
I was one of those women that thought my purpose was ever just being a mother.
Yeah.
But apart from that, I had unhealed pathology and unhealed trauma that was being repressed. And if that kind of stuff is not dealt with and not healed, there's absolutely no way that you're going to know what your purpose is. People, being a parent is the biggest purpose because you get to affect change in people's lives. You get to learn from your children. But I was not receptive to any of that because I was in so much of suffering. I was embroiled in this darkness and could not see the light. It was not available for me. Yeah. So if someone came to me and said to me 7 years ago that your life's going to change and you're going to be this person that, you know, inspires people to live, I would never have believed you. Nothing would have landed for me. So even though I had, in effect, you know, I had this responsibility of taking care of these two lives, I could not see it. Yeah. And so your purpose is really something that is not static, it's dynamic. And it's something that can be as simple as, you know, loving the people that are around you. That's purposeful. Yeah. In the right kind of energy in the world, but you don't see your worth. You don't see the impact that you can have in someone's life if you are immersed in that darkness. Yeah. Why I'm such an advocate for destigmatization of mental health issues. I sit on a board of directors for a psychiatric hospital in Johannesburg. I sit on a global mental health peer organization on the executive committee because it is massively important that we get to destigmatize and have these hard conversations and promote the healing that we desperately need so that people can start, you know, finding their purpose. And, you know, purpose is a subjective thing. What's purpose for me is very different.
Sure,
for
absolutely, yeah.
So that's in essence the thing, that we have to literally deal with all of the stuff that we keep repressed, and that's the only way that you're going to be able to find your purpose. You'll never know it before then.
Yeah, so, something came up when you were sharing this, which is basically that we cannot find our purpose, or we cannot be our full selves when we are still engulfed in our blind spots, engulfed in this darkness that you were in. And I guess what happened in those 3 days for you is you went through processing those experiences, or also you probably learned ways to continue to do so as you moved on your path. Yeah. And I imagine by actually going through an experience, we can let go of it, and it's kind of, you as you said before, you bring it into the light for it to be seen, and once it's being seen, it kind of helps it be dissolved. Because what we typically do, as you mentioned yourself also, is we distract ourselves with kind of addictions, bad habits, whatever it can be, you know, and bad practices, all for the purpose of not having to see or witness that part. But actually by doing so, we can get through it, or we can move through it and become free from it.
Absolutely. But I think also the pivotal thing for me was that I didn't have to make my story bad. So my experiences at one stage, I was a permanent victim. I used to be the most miserable woman ever. And I would feel so much of shame to tell someone that I was divorced twice. So much of shame to talk about the fact that I was a victim of rape, or that I had 3 miscarriages. Because we have all of these societal norms that repress us. And for me, I realized actually, for me to have gone through a succession of things that most people would never have survived, one after the other. I mean, one trauma in itself is rape. I had miscarriages, 3 of them. I had 2 divorces, all really huge traumas. And for me, I own my story, and I don't want to discard it. I don't, because what happens is that while it defined me, it actually made me become this woman. Yes. So I get wrong. My life experiences weren't wrong. It was a catalyst for what made me become this woman, and I'm incredibly proud of that. And I think we need to get to that space where we don't carry the shame of our experiences. We don't carry the stigma that's attached to whatever choices we've made. We understand it's part of our process, our growth process, our life cycle. Yes. It happens is what you become as a result of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree with that. And also, I'd just like to give you back that obviously 2 marriages that or two divorce you had, just as an example to highlight. I mean, society tells us we shouldn't divorce, Yeah. Says who?
Yeah.
And then you probably, you with your best intentions, you married these 2 individuals, and it turned out that they weren't who you thought they were, or it wasn't a good match, and therefore you parted ways. That was probably the best for both of you. So what is more valuable? That's the real experience, and Absolutely. It's not what society expects us to do. Yeah. This again is about living your truth and being true to who you are and what's right for you. And that doesn't have to be right for the rest of the world at all.
But that's exactly a thing. I mean, I always say that my life is not a democracy. Yes. And I'm clear on that. My life is not a democracy.
Yeah, I like that.
I have the final say.
Yeah.
That's what we call a Tivaniaism. My life is a democracy. So we have the final say in our lives. And I think that we need to start getting used to that. Because we have all of these whisperings of other people. And for me, for the longest time, I didn't even recognize which was my authentic voice. I had all of these different voices in my head that were telling me, no, this is the right way. This is the right way. This is how you have to be. This is what you need to look like. Until eventually my body was screaming at me saying, just silence, Yeah. And when I got to that stage, I realized, okay, I need to drown out all of the others so that I could find my authentic voice. And that is something that is an every single day practice still.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. One question about the writing, because you mentioned that since the 7 years you've been writing a lot, and you've written your book as kind of a way or as a means to heal yourself. And by doing so, you've also inspired other people to do the same. So what is this practice of writing or journaling? How has this impacted your process? I imagine, and maybe I'm starting to answer myself, but I imagine this is also similar to actually experiencing the thing that needs to be experienced by the mere fact of writing it down. Mm-hmm. Can you share more about your writing process?
So for everyone else, the process of healing is different. It could be art, it could be music, it could be running, it could be gym. For me, it's writing, because what it does is that I have been accustomed for 25 years to suppress my truth, as we all did. What happens to me is that I'm left to have those bad feelings fester. So for me, whatever I'm dealing with, writing is a release. So in that moment, in that very moment, and I understand, and I get a lot of flack for the fact that I speak my truth and I share my life story, the light and the dark, because I feel like we can't always, the people that have become motivational speakers show the after effect. But being human means we are going to have this ebb and flow of life.
Yeah.
We be conscious and we're going to go back to being awake. And it's a process of navigating and being aware, right? So it's not that we are always going to be awake every single day. We're going to fall down, but it's about how you pick yourself up. So when I talk about my truth and when I write my truth, the words, I get into a space where the words just flow out of me. It is something that I don't think about. So my brain is switched off, my heart is on, and I say it the way that I feel. So even if it's a rotten thing, even if it's a horrible, dark post, I write it down, because then what happens is that it leaves my body, the energy leaves my body, and then it's released. It is similar to a 2-year-old having a tantrum, if you can picture that. 2-year-olds have all of this pent-up energy, and the energy has to be released. So they have like a 30-second tantrum, sometimes 2-minute tantrum, and then it's done. It's out of your body.
Yeah.
That is what writing effectively does for me, the good, bad. So the bad energy that's stuck is out of my body, and then it's done.
Yeah. Yeah, we should all do more of that. Maybe not
We
writing.
need to find a thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, whatever
works, but we do need to process
Mm.
and release. I think the principle of release is extremely important.
And you know, the release for me is not it's not quiet and beautiful. It's not that. It is screaming and swearing
messy.
And it's very messy. Transformation is very, very messy.
Yeah.
That's how you get through it, right? The only way out is through.
Yeah.
So it's the through process, and it's very difficult. It's very, very difficult.
The only way out is through.
Yes.
Yeah, that's beautifully said.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tivaniaism.
What is needed for us, if you would have to list maybe 3 or 4 key points? What would be needed for us? And we've talked about a lot of it, but what would be needed for us to change this story that we have about ourselves and that we share about ourselves, which oftentimes, again, when we're not present, is holding us back, and it's keeping us locked and tight down to these past experiences, which all they are, they're past experiences, whether or not they were dark or light, they were all just there to teach us a lesson, which in essence is a valuable thing. So what 3 things do we need to change our story and to wake up to see it?
Well, again, it is literally the acceptance that there is a story to begin with. That requires a lot of examining, because we, as I say, people don't want to face their truth for whatever reason. It's too scary, it's too hard, but you can't deal or heal with the stuff that you don't face. So the first thing is to absolutely face your truth, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Second, it's to understand that collectively, every single one of us have the same fears. We all have the same pain. There's no such thing as being a failure if you've done 15 bad things, because one of us have made mistakes. This problem with comparison is a real, for me, it's just exceptionally dangerous, because you compare your life, your insights to someone's highlight reel that you see on social media.
Exactly, yeah.
Be aware that people are showing you the best versions of themselves on social media. It's not reality. So you need to, you know, for me, that acceptance that I am just like everyone else. I have the same pain, the same fear, the same shame, all of that is the thing that released me. It gave me permission to own my truth, because I didn't want to be the only one. I didn't want to be ostracized. I didn't want to be cast aside. It was a very scary thing, because as humans, we have a need for belonging and safety. And so when I started, you know, speaking my truth, it, as I said, it had a ripple effect. It was a me too exercise.
Yeah.
And then another thing that you have to sort of make peace with is that the environment in which you were brought up in, or how you were raised, may not be the legacy that you need to create. Maybe you are here to be the black sheep, to break cycles of dysfunction. Because I know that a lot of people come to me and say, how do I speak my truth when I know that it's going to devastate my family? How am I going to own my truth when everyone else in my family hasn't? How am I going to speak up when everyone else hasn't? And again, I say to them, you know, we are each here on our own path, and you may be born into a family, but you're an individual, and you've got to understand that identity. And what can happen is that you may be the one that gives other people permission to be free.
Yeah. Interesting point, because actually I've spoken to Pravin Shakur from India about this process. He's actually an outlier marketeer, and I've talked to him about really being your unique self. And he shared the experience, and this in line with what you're saying, where there's very strict societal norms about how you shouldn't be. And he's always been on about seeking the boundaries of what's acceptable, and finding as to say, mentors and cheerleaders or people who support this process within the system for you to be at the boundary and then maybe even step outside of it. And
but interestingly, when I was growing up, I never had somebody to model. I never had somebody who was an Indian girl like me emulate. There was no one. And then I realized, oh, I had to actually become that woman.
Yeah.
That was my job, right?
Yeah.
Because it's me and my loud voice that has now given other Indian girls permission to say, well, I don't want to be put in this box of what an Indian girl should be. I am not a sari wearing, biryani making woman that needs to be subservient to a husband. I can make different choices.
Yeah.
And it be me that breaks that cycle, right? Because even in my own family, a lot of the women are severely indoctrinated and severely repressed and can't make decisions. But I had to be the one that deviated from that, as hard as it was, with very little support. But I made a new way that my daughter now has different choices. And if I had not done that, if I had stuck with that mold and been in that, my daughter would have thought, okay, it's okay for me to live this life of actual misery.
Yeah.
So I've completely broken down that cycle of dysfunction. And there was no one around me that I could emulate, that I could say, okay, I actually want to be like her. So I had to become that woman.
Yeah.
So sometimes in your environment, you don't know, there's no one else that's doing something different. Maybe that's your job.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's not about emulating other people and copy pasting their practice.
You can't. Yeah.
No, you can't, because that's not yourself anyway. You have to
Exactly.
you have to find your own spot and your own way of being. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there is always a unique way. There is always a unique way. Even if, I mean, if you think about me, I didn't write my book for 5 years because I was petrified that nobody would find it interesting. What would be so exciting about my story? Why would it resonate with people when there are 100 million people that have had worse of experiences? I wrote it with the intention of honoring myself, and then my book took a life of its own. And people, especially men, which is extremely interesting, because you would think that the way society prescribes it, you would imagine that a man would not resonate with the words of a woman, especially an Indian girl that's talking about all of these hard things. I've had so many men say to me, I've read your book and it saved me from suicide. So, you know, you'll never know the impact that you can make when you are in alignment with who you truly are.
Yeah.
It just is the most beautiful experience, and you'd never want to go back to being asleep.
Yeah, actually, it gives me goosebumps in a way of like, I feel it's from a place of recognition, because when we are our full selves, there is really an unlimited availability of power and energy for us to utilize and to propel ourselves forward.
And you'll know when you're in alignment when you start attracting people that gravitate towards you.
Yes.
And you become this co-creator of magic, as I was talking about you and I from the beginning.
Yeah.
You'll know that that's how you are vibrating at that high level. That's how you are in your purpose. That's how your energy is elevated, is when all of these great things are happening. And then you'll be able to see when you are not at that level, and when you are down in despair, and when you are being a victim, and when you are miserable, and when you are lying about who you truly are. You will have accidents. Your life will not go as planned. You will be miserable every single day. Yeah. And that to me is the clear indicator. You'll have diseases, you'll get ill. So all of these things are indicators that something's not okay. And then, you know, you need to have the awareness to say, well, what do I need to do to change this? And as I said before, it's an ebb and flow. I mean, I'm in an exceptional state today, but tomorrow I will be down, life happens, but the awareness comes with knowing exactly what to do to pick yourself up again.
It's actually a really good point. And I've learned this by myself also from experience, that I've made myself wrong many times for being unproductive some days, or really not having the energy, or feeling down, or feeling depressed for a certain phase, what I know now, and I've learned this also through the experience of meditation, that really on a physical level, that everything comes and goes. And the same for these feelings, the same for our thoughts, the same, and both for the good, by the way. Also the good, and when we're on this high and we're serving the way, also that just goes. It comes and goes, and it's all temporary, and that's okay. But it gives so much great nuance to life and appreciation for what is, and some relativation for the downtimes, everything comes and goes, and it's okay if we're down one time, the next time we'll be up again.
Absolutely. And it's just making peace with not living in the past and not being fixated in the future. We are very future driven, but all we do have is this moment. And this is a concept that's very hard for me because I'm a planner. I just want to know exactly what's going to happen 5 days from now, 5 years from now. I'm neurotic about it. So like mindfulness and being in the moment is very difficult. But I've learned that, time is an illusion. And I know this when I hear of people dying every single day. And I know this from having had a near-death experience. Time is an illusion, and all we have is this moment right now. So it's what you do with this moment that counts. And if you're down and if you're having a miserable day, pour love into yourself. It's fine. Pour love into yourself generously and then get back up again. That is how we live a life. That is what it means to be human.
Actually, my business partner, he shared with me, he's 20 years older than me. And he shared with me one thing when I was in Myanmar and things were really down and very difficult. And I was experiencing quite some despair about the situation. He said, Julius, do 5 things, 5 nice things for yourself and for other people. Don't do anything, just do those 5 things. Take a nice bath, make yourself a nice tea, but really do it for yourself and also for other people. Make someone a compliment or whatever. After those 5 things, your energies change, and it always works. It's a great thing.
It always works. It always, absolutely, it always works. So everything that's missing in your life, you give it away. That it's weird. So for me, like that has very unsuccessful romantic relationships, I've realized that the more I give out love generously, it comes back to me in different ways, and I'm still fulfilled, which is great. Whereas before 5 years ago, it was about why am I not finding romance? What do I do?
We have to give first.
Exactly. First. All of it. Even being grateful for where you are, grateful for life, grateful for your experiences, all of it just gets you feeling grateful.
Gratitude is a big ingredient for happiness. Absolutely.
For sure. Absolutely.
Last question, because I want to be mindful of the time because of the impeding power cut that's coming up. Tivania, what question about the story that we tell about ourselves and others that I didn't ask, which I should have asked? Because I like to close with this question. Every talk that I have for this project, I end with this question. Is there one question about what we've been talking about that I should have asked but didn't ask?
I don't think so, but maybe we can say, who are you before the world told you who you had to be?
Ooh.
Who are you before the world told you who you had to be?
Well, I'll leave that for the reader and the viewer and the listener to answer.
I'm asking you that question though. Do you know the answer to it?
Do I know the answer to it?
Who are you?
I would say I'm love.
Exactly that. And that's why we're connected, right? Because I am love.
We are one in that sense.
Exactly. Lovely. Beautiful.
Hey, thanks so much. I will stay in touch with you, and I want
please do.
See your journey continue.
Sure.
When I post all of this, also follow up, and I'll send you everything so you know where to find it.
Please do. Send me the link. I'd love to see. But thank you so much. This was such an honor. Thank you very much for reaching out.
I appreciate your time. Have a beautiful day. And enjoy some silent time during the power cut.
I can't wait. Thank you.
Hey,
cheers.
Bye.
Bye.